UFOs have been seen for decades. Many believe them to be aliens, others believe them to be some kind of spiritual beings. But what if I told you that all of it was a hoax perpetrated by your own government in order to manipulate you and change your beliefs and your behavior? You're watching Filibusted. I'm Reese Black, and I'm joined today by Doug Smith. And I need Doug on for today's topic because we are getting into the realm of conspiracy theories, and Doug is our resident master conspiracy theorist. And I also need him because I have just done a massive deep dive into Project Bluebeam, which I had heard about before, but I did not know really the ins and outs of the theories. And I have read the original document, Project Bluebeam document written in 1994 now. And so I know a lot about the history of it now, but I don't know exactly where it stands in the year of 2025. So I'm hoping Doug can maybe shine some light on where that conspiracy theory is looking at today and what people think and believe about it. But before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody that this is a series that I'm doing on aliens, UFOs, and I'm going to show last week. Go check it out if you haven't seen it. I did one on the U.S. Covering up UFO evidence. And in this episode, I actually talked about a 2004 incident where a bunch of Navy pilots saw a UFO, several UFOs, and they got close enough to a UFO that there's 6 pilots that claimed to have seen it with their naked eyes, watched it. It was picked up on radar. It was filmed. You can watch the film of it, all that kind of stuff. And I bring that up because this is actually going to be, there's some connections to that incident that we're going to get into later in this episode when we talk about the idea of possible faked UFOs that are actually just projections by the government. So we're going to get into that. The first episode I did in this series was on the 3I Atlas comet, which is coming up here in a few weeks. And so go back if you want to learn about that. And next week, just to let you know, I will be tackling this from more of a spiritual, biblical perspective about the whole aliens versus spiritual beings. And I will talk about the possibility of them being biological aliens or spiritual beings. But today, I forgot to pull up my questions, but I had several questions that I was going to ask, that I'm asking over the course of this series. And today we're answering one of the first questions I asked, which is it possible that all of this stuff is not aliens, is not spiritual beings, but in fact, all of the UFOs that we are seeing in the skies and pilots are seeing, all that kind of stuff, all the alien activity is actually just completely faked, made up by the government. And then what people are seeing with their naked eyes is some kind of hologram or some sort of projection. And if so, how is that possible? And if so, why? And so that's what we're going to get into today. And so this is Project Bluebeam. And so without further ado, I'm going to give a quick synopsis of what Project Bluebeam is and the guy who wrote it, who titled it, who came up with the original theory. And then I'm going to kick it over to Doug to kind of talk about this idea of, is it possible that the UFOs that we have seen and witnessed, I think it's 100,000 incidents have been, or reports or incidents have been recorded in the last 100 years of UFOs, many of which have been supposedly debunked by experts, but I could point to a bunch, especially like that event in 2004, where that have not been debunked by anybody, and just sort of like crazy real world events that trained pilots are seeing and betting their careers on to talk about. But before I get into that, let's talk about what is Project Bluebeam and where did it come from. So this is the brainchild of a French Canadian, a Quebec journalist, poet, and conspiracy theorist, whose name was Sergei Manas. I might be saying his name wrong. The only interviews you can find with him are in French. So, there's that. But Sergei, I'll be calling him for the rest of the time here. So he had this theory, which he wrote down in 1994 in this book, Le Project Bluebeam, that NASA, and this included the Pentagon and also the UN as well, was in on this, but he usually refers to NASA doing most of this stuff, has a plot to establish a one world religion, which will then become the foundation of a one world government. So that's the general plot, the general synopsis. But this includes his claim that UFO sightings up to that point, 1994, were all holographic projections by technology being tested out by the U.S. government. And the reason is because the U.S. government is working on holographic technology so that they can project some massive events in the atmosphere to be seen globally, one of which will be a fake alien invasion. That's one of the things he claimed. The other one is fake religious events. So think like the return of Christ being projected into the sky to make Christians think that Jesus has returned, but he also includes all other religions and deities as well, depending on what part of the world you live in. And this and other, he lists out a lot of other events that will eventually allow a new world order takeover based off of this. And he lists out 4 specific steps that will happen in order for this to occur. And I'm going to explain them all later in this episode when I'm going to actually go through this book, the summary of it. I read it this morning. It's only 12 pages, so a pretty short read. But for right now, we're going to be focusing on the claim that UFOs are government projections or holograms, right, and not actual vehicles. But a little bit more about Sergei. Of course, he was French Canadian. Like I said, there's a 12-page document here. I'm going to pull up. You can read the whole thing for yourself. It's actually like a 39-page book, but the rest of it was added by other editors and contributors later on. And as far as I could tell, it was only 12 pages that were written by Sergei. He got into conspiracy theories and researching secret societies in the 90s, and really got into talking about this coming new world order. He wrote this, of course, in 94. He wrote another book, I believe, in 95. And then he had a mysterious death in 1996, which actually lends itself to some of his conspiracy theories that he wrote about. It's not easy to find, I would say, credible information on his life or death. So in the footnote on the version that I read, it talks about how right before he died, the Canadian government took away his 2 children from him and his wife. They were 7 and 8 years old because they were homeschooling them, and they were accused of emotional abuse by the government. And so they took their kids. And then he was arrested at least once. I saw one source claim that he was arrested twice. The footnote said he was arrested right before he died. He was sent home after being arrested. I don't know why he was arrested. And then his cause of death is supposed to be a heart attack at the age of 51. And of course, he did warn people in his writings here about the government possessing the ability, an array essentially that could give somebody a heart attack. So that kind of, you could see, obviously, people that believed in his writings adopted that as like, well, they must have offed him. And so, yeah, it also claimed that another journalist besides him that was also researching Project Bluebeam died also of a heart attack within a few weeks of Sergei. So
coincidence.
That furthers that kind of coincidental thing happening there. But they didn't list who that person was, and I cannot verify if that in fact is true, but that is said in the editor's note at the beginning of the book. So that's a little bit about Sergei, his mysterious death, and that's obviously ripe for theories. But let's jump into these fake UFOs, Doug. So anytime I see people talk aliens or UFOs online, anytime, YouTube, X, Facebook, doesn't matter. If it's a big enough post and there's Facebook comments, if there's comments underneath it, somebody will post Project Bluebeam underneath it. Right. Somebody. We're talking about UFOs, aliens. I see this all the time, which is why I finally had to look into it today. And so I've now looked into it. I read this original thing. I want to see, what do you think in general about this idea, the possibility that UFOs are being faked by the government?
Well, first, I think that it's really unfair to just slap a label on anything without knowing for sure. So like, and that goes like across the board, like for the conspiracy theorists, for the data heads, for whoever it is, like it's not really the best approach to just go ahead and be like, oh, for sure, Project Bluebeam, or oh no, for sure it's aliens, or no, for sure it's government. Like number one, we don't really actually know. And number two, there are multiple different things that it could possibly be. So that's the other reason why that's kind of not a great thing to do. So you have different options. Number one, you have actual physical things that have been found, right? That it's kind of hard to deny that we have evidence of physical machinery that has been found. And
it makes me think of David Grush, I believe his name. He's one of the whistleblowers that's talked to Congress that claim that we have physical vehicles that have been the government has found and recovered vehicles. He even made the claim that those vehicles had biologicals in them,
Biological.
aka something
Yeah.
non-human that was flying them. That was the
Yeah.
claim that he made to Congress.
Mhm.
So okay, so yeah, but just throwing that in there.
Yeah, so we have that, and then we do have the potential for holograms with Project Bluebeam, and then we do have just misidentified technology. And what I mean by that is that could be pretty much anything, but what it actually oftentimes I believe is some sort of government program that was secretive and went wrong, and then normal people found it, and then they went, "Oh yeah, that's aliens. Don't look over here." You know, so there are just so many different options for what it
Do
could
you think the
possibly
government
be.
can use aliens as a general cover up? Like if
Absolutely.
something the government is doing is gets exposed, or somebody finds something
Yeah.
like you said, then the government can be like just kind of throw the alien idea out there in the air, to
Yeah,
make people think
it does
that.
not take much to get people to like take that and run with it.
Hmm.
And that's what a like easy cover up. If you're doing something that you really don't want people to know about, then just call it aliens, and it gets it you're gonna delegitimize it quickly. You know,
Hmm.
so, and I'm not saying my point behind this is saying that it could be any one of these various things. So it's unfair to just like you're talking about the commenters are saying Project Bluebeam, like, well, maybe
Hmm.
it could be something to do with a hologram, or it could be a real thing. I don't know. We have to do more research on it, on each specific individual one. So it kind of depends. But I do believe that there are many different options, and it just depends on what we're talking about, when we're talking about it, and who's involved, right?
Yeah. Well, let's dig a little bit more into the this idea about the hologram. So again, Project Bluebeam. I'm going to get into all this the claims of Project Bluebeam, and maybe you can help me sort them out later because there's a lot of
Sure.
claims, including like a little bit of everything, a little bit of like all the kind
It's
of
more
different.
than just hologram talk.
Right. There's
It's
a
a
little bit of
whole
everything
thing.
going on, but
Yeah.
focusing on the possibility of holograms for right now. I don't know. I was going to get into something, but if you had something maybe about, did you have any thoughts about the possibility of holograms? You think it could be a mixture, that maybe some of the things that people have seen were actually just
Yeah.
holograms?
Absolutely. And once again, it depends on the story, but holograms here, I'll just go ahead and jump into this real quick. I have a document pulled up here from NASA from 1973 that is a study on holograms and the practical use of them. And it actually talks about using holograms. So we have had this technology for a long time, and it's only gotten better since then, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so here's a little description of what it's like. This image is truly three-dimensional because each eye sees the statue's image. It's giving an example of what they used, which was a statue, through a different area of the hologram and thus perceives it from a different aspect. As your head and eyes move, the image changes in perspective exactly as the original statue would appear to an observer moving about and looking through a window the same size as the frame. So, and then it just goes on to talk more, give more details about this. And this is a like 200-page study here, straight from NASA. Um, it says fields for holographic applications are law enforcement and crime prevention, banking and economic control, food production, processing and distribution, uh, communications, data processing, education, welfare, transportation, entertainment, building, construction. It goes on aerospace exploration and utilization. So there's actually saying they can use this stuff pretty far out too. Like it's not just here on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and defense is the last one in that lineup. So this is a thing. I think it's important to know that the technology for holograms isn't just restricted to putting post mortem Michael Jackson on stage and having him
Oh,
sing.
right,
You know
right.
what I mean? Like it's more than that. We can do a whole lot more than that, which that by itself is kind of mind blowing if you think about it.
No, it is. There definitely is evidence of a certain amount of holographic technology that we have. I'm going to get into this guy because I think when I was researching the possibility of the UFOs, because people know, if you watched the episode last week, done a lot of research on UFOs and UFO
Mhm.
encounters and claims by pilots seeing UFOs in the last couple of weeks, and this was one of the things I saw that was one of the most, for me, might be one of the more convincing claims and explanations that maybe a certain amount of these things, maybe all of them, I don't know, I don't lean towards all of them for different reasons we might get into, but a certain amount of these things not being physical, but actually being
Mhm.
possibly holograms. So this is a guy. His name is Robert Duncan. I've got him pulled up right here. I actually have it, the timestamp right around the 2-hour mark in this interview where he actually talks about. He moves away from talking about CIA mind control weapons still being used today. So he is considered to be a whistleblower of DARPA, which is like new military technology. He's a Harvard MIT scientist. He used to work for the government. Apparently, he's worked for the CIA and the military. Apparently, I didn't know about this guy until today. So you can look up. I have some issues with him I'll get into, but here are some of the claims that he makes. And I'm just going to read a quote from him because he just summarizes it so clearly, faster than I could do with statements. But he talks about the floating balls or UFOs that pilots see, and he makes the claim that they are fake, or at least a certain amount of them are fake. And he says, quote, "We play with our own forces to see if our trickery would work on the enemy." And quote, "Those are directed
Oh,
energy
wow.
weapons of where we do intersecting beams or focus beams into the atmosphere." And then he says, and notice they're always in the atmosphere. So he's describing how they create these UFO looking things in the atmosphere, right?
Mhm.
And he says they're always in the atmosphere to excite the electron orbitals of the oxygen and nitrogen in our atmosphere. It causes the glow and it causes ionization. I don't really know too much about this scientifically, but this is his words. He says the ionization shows up on radar. He says it's like a cat laser pointer, and we're making planes chase them. So several planes, yeah. Well, there's several
That's
planes
kinda
he
messed
gets
up.
into, which all kind of line up pretty well with the and they actually get into the 2004 incident a little bit, but it lines up a lot with some of the things that pilots have seen. And so he says they're seen by the naked eye, but they also show up on radar. He claims that this ionization laser beam thing they're shooting into the sky is a physical, not physical, but it looks physical. It's a beam. It's
Right.
a orb. He said you can make it into an orb. He said you can make it into more of like a cigar shape. He says it's visible to the naked eye. He says it shows up on radar, which is huge because that was a lot of the things that have shown up on radar. And that's where they're like, well, if they're
Right.
just holograms, they wouldn't show up on radar. Well, he claims that these laser pointer things do show up on radar. He also says that it acts like a laser pointer, meaning that they can zip them around. And that would explain the some of the movements of them, because whenever pilots
Right.
talked about these things, they're like, they do things that is physically impossible for any ship to do. They zip around and they change directions in a way that any known technology that we have as humans would cause it to implode and blow up if a
Right.
jet ever tried to do that and was moved around in that way. It would disintegrate under the forces. And so the laser pointer idea is interesting.
Yeah.
I will say though, the host presses him about the specifics of Navy pilots. He's like, "Oh well, I'm having these Navy pilots come on my show pretty soon here," and he was like, "And they're going to talk about this, but they saw the one I talked about last week. They saw a UFO come out of the water and fly
Mm.
around 50 feet above the water and go in between the planes." Another pilot saw one, and he said it had like a cube inside of a sphere. And Duncan's response to both of those was, he's like, "No, it can't do that. I don't know about that kind of technology." So he admitted, as a whistleblower, he's describing a certain kind of technology. But when the
Yeah.
host pressed him on some of the things that pilots had seen, like the fact that it's not up in the atmosphere, it was like, well, this was low down. It was 50 feet above the water. And the pilots actually saw it come out of the water, or it was
Right.
in between the planes. And you're saying it's being projected. How would it be? And he was like, "No, that's something else. I don't know what
Yeah.
that technology
That
is."
can't be either a hologram or a laser pointer, we'll just call it.
Right. I would say, if those pilots are telling the truth, which I tend to believe them, for reasons. You go. That's last week's episode. Go watch last week's episode about why I tend to believe the pilots. I think that
Mhm.
more likely they were actually seeing something physical. But I thought this was interesting. The way that he described it made it be like, well, maybe possibly some of it is like that. Do you have any thoughts about his claims on this specifically?
That makes a lot of sense, and that would just add another element to the whole variety of UFOs, I guess. If you really want to take it by its literal term, unidentified flying object,
Right. Right. When we say
then
UFO here, we're just talking about
it
something
doesn't
that's
always
moving
mean
around the
aliens.
sky.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah,
know
we
what it
don't know
is.
what it is, and it's in the sky or it's moving
Mhm.
around. Yeah, like it's so yeah, it just adds another variable to the mix, which makes it harder to pin down, you know.
No, it absolutely does. I'm going to just lift a couple things really quick about Robert Duncan, just because this is going to get into, when we get into Sergey, who wrote the original 1994, you will see the connection between him and Sergey. But this is unfortunate. So this episode was done in 2022. He actually died in 2024 at the age of 56. And I'm just gonna pull up this. There are people that, because he was a whistleblower and he was warning people about energy weapons and CIA mind control, there are people who claim that people that like to stuff tend to claim that he was basically assassinated via a directed energy weapon. And which, when we get into Sergei, you'll see, of course, the same thing. He warned people the government has devices that can give people heart attacks from afar. And Sergei, and then apparently another journalist, died of a heart attack. And so people have made the same claims here. I'm not saying that's true. I don't know enough about it. Right. But you can see why people would make those connections. I will say about this guy, I wish I had known about him for a little bit longer, but I just want to throw out, from you, people can go watch this interview. From the little bit I've seen of him and the people describing him on like other things that I've seen, I don't really like this guy. I honestly don't. He doesn't seem legitimate to me. I think he
or maybe
could
like
possibly,
he's hiding something.
I think he could be hiding something, or I think he could be lying about all of this. I think he gets a little too much joy. Like in this interview, he gets a lot of joy from like knowing and hinting at things. He doesn't seem like a serious person who's actually warning people of something. He's like, oh, I know this thing. He's like, well, I can't talk about that because that's too classified. But he's like, wink, wink. But yeah, but your suspicions are correct. At one point, the host asks him, well, he's like, who's doing the laser pointer thing? Who's making our military chase these things to see if they work so they can use them on, foreign entities? And he basically, to me, he gets this expression and stutters in this way that's like, to me, it looks like he's trying to think of who he should say it is, like as if he's coming up with it on the spot. But then he goes into like, well, they, like somebody I can't talk about. And I just like, he really could be a real whistleblower, but I get some bad vibes from him. And I found some other like weird stuff that he's done. He just seems to be a little bit of an odd guy. And so I don't know how of a legitimate source he is, but I was talking about him because he has a very good connection to Sergei, with the people claiming that he was assassinated with an energy weapon. And also his claim about the laser pointer, I think, was one of the best explanations of how, these things could actually just be being projected by somebody else. I want to see, do you have any other thoughts about, let me wrap this up real fast. This is my last things about the UFO before we get into Project Bluebeam, and I'll see if you have any thoughts about it. I also noticed that there was I saw this going around. There's a U.S. Navy patent for holograms. However, this article and some other ones, I feel like kind of lay it out pretty well that could not be the UFOs that most pilots are seeing. There is a patent, but this patent specifically is for like planes putting like a plasma ball off the back of their plane when like a missile that is tracking them to like take them down. He's usually using like flares and stuff to like distract. So it's like a plasma ball that would I think maybe would possibly show up on radar, and a missile would hit it instead of hitting the plane. But they're not visible to the naked eye, and they're not really like controllable in the way that we described earlier. So this is one I've seen people be like, oh, look, the US is got, like, people will be like, well, look, they're using holograms. But when you look into it, it's like, it's not always like, well, yeah, but this isn't the kind of hologram that Sergei was talking about. Like this would not be used for like a mass global projection kind of situation. Or it can't really describe in detail how the UFO sightings worked. And I guess my last thoughts about this whole thing, of course, we mentioned already, David Grush has talked about, we have vehicles, we've recovered vehicles. People have seen UFOs for like the last 100 years. And there's no way we had this kind of laser technology that Robert Duncan described. There's no way we had that in the 1940s. I don't believe we had that in the 1940s. Like,
it's unlikely, but I mean, so
what do you think about that?
There are a couple of different things. There's a couple different theories. And some of them are pretty wild. So you have to really.
I want to hear the theories. That's what we're here for, and that's why you're here. You're the master conspiracy theorist. Lay it on me.
So there's the theory that here, I'll give the first one that's not as wild. The first one is that some of these recovered parts or materials are actually satellites that crashed back down. Right, that's a pretty easy one. or there's something to that nature, basically. So it's a normal thing that people really misunderstood, and it got out of hand. Okay, that's one. And I'm talking period about like actual physical options here.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is, this one's super fun. Okay, so in Nazi Germany, World War II, there's this idea that Hitler escaped. He did not actually kill himself. Went to Antarctica, and like eventually Antarctica. And there are actually Nazis still here, and they have the advanced technologies. So if there's
I have heard
another,
of this theory. I've heard of the Nazi lasers theory, maybe,
yeah.
but I don't know anything about it. But yeah,
So it's
continue.
like UFOs with swastikas on them. That if you want to research it, that would be the easiest way to like dig into that. Yeah,
Okay.
there are
Never seen that.
sightings of UFOs with swastikas on them. There are stories of pilots being essentially commandeered by these UFOs, and it's like a technology that they can't understand, but it forces them to ground, and then they go and they talk to the people, actual people who come out of these UFOs, and they're Germans. They're straight up like World War II era Germans after World War II ended. So there's like this idea that there's a secret base complex on the other side of the Antarctic wall, basically, where there actually is land that's not frozen. It's open, green, luscious land. So another thing to look up for our viewers is Admiral Byrd, the flight of Admiral Byrd. He was back in black and white TV days. He actually went over through Antarctica and on the other side, and he was one of these guys that got grounded by technology he did not understand, and he had to talk to some people on the other side, and they basically told him don't ever come back. And he came back to the States and gave this whole story on live TV too. Actually, it's a crazy story. So but that's just all to say
a fun
that
one to dig into for
there's
our
a
viewers.
potential for beyond the ice wall kind of theories and stories over there, where it's advanced technology that does exist, and we're just being monitored by these people on the other side, and they're watching us, and they dip in every once in a while to come check out what's going on or something like that. Gotcha. So that's a fun one. So go look that one up. That's a rabbit hole you could go down for a long time. And it would make a really good movie too, actually.
Well, that would make a great movie. That'd make a great another episode. Well, we're going to move on to, what I was going to be talking about was the craziest conspiracy theory. We'll see if this one, the Project Blue Beam, which one sounds more extraordinary and which one sounds more possible. Because we were talking about some really extraordinary theories here. I'm going to dig into the claims of Project Blue Beam, which does not involve any of the what Doug just talked about. It does not involve any of that stuff. I'm not sure if you'd be able to reconcile those together. It'd be interesting to see. But we're going to talk about the claims of Project Blue Beam, all 4 steps that Sergei claimed needed to happen or was going to happen before this one world government takeover occurs. Before I get into that, let us hear a message from our sponsor.
Investing can be confusing and scary, but it doesn't have to be. Genesis Gold Group takes the guessing out of the game and guides you on your gold investment journey. We at Filibusted love the genius design of the Prepper Bar, which breaks up into sections, kind of like a chocolate bar. But if you prefer high security insured gold storage, they have that too. And unlike Fort Knox, the gold is actually there, 100% owned by you. So don't wait to get started. Visit filibustedgold.com today for a free investment guide from Genesis Gold Group.
All right. And again, I'm super glad that you're here, Doug, because I'm going to be digging into this theory laid out by Sergei in 1994. And I want to be hearing your, like, just the ones you were just sharing. I want to be hearing your insights into, like, how does this connect to where we are today? Whether or not any of this is plausible, or what people think about any of this stuff at this point. In my mind, when people throw out Project Blue Beam, I tend to think they're just talking about something related to holograms, or the government faking an alien invasion. That's my general takeaway. Most because people always throw it out talking about aliens. So they're like, well, they're probably throwing it out because they're like, hey, be wary. Either one, the government could be faking an alien invasion with all these UFOs, or if it's a mix and if maybe there's aliens, maybe there's spiritual beings, maybe we don't know what's going on exactly, but maybe the government will use it as an excuse to kind of take away your rights in a sense. Maybe a one world government would use aliens as an excuse to, unite everybody underneath what will end up being like a totalitarian regime, a one world sort of government.
I think that's the general takeaway too for most people. That is understanding.
Cool. That's kind of my thought. That was kind of my thoughts. But I'm going to get into
there are more details, but that's like the bottom line.
Yeah, we're going to get into the details. So stop me at any point. I'm going to go through this as quickly as I can because there is a lot here, but I just think it's worth reading through and knowing what Sergey himself thought Project Bluebeam was. So this is a English translation of his book. Like I said, the first 12 pages are Sergey, and after that, it's just added on to by other authors and editors and stuff. And so the original theory is what I'm going to be covering today. I will say that this kind of read like one long unhinged Alex Jones rant. And so, that's kind of just be that as it may. I will say I was surprised. He gives a lot of explanation about the mind control stuff. He gives very little explanation actually about UFOs. He barely talks about UFOs being holograms. He mentions UFOs being holograms. That's pretty much it. He really has he doesn't give any sources for how the projections would work. He just gives a theory of how he thinks the projections would work. And that's it. I just, in general, before I get into this, I'll say he doesn't present very much proof for any of this, very little proof. There's no sources or interviews with whistleblowers to back up his largest claims. He just makes a lot of general statements about like, this is going to happen. And then he points to current technology existing, whether it be the US government or the Soviets having the technology and using it already, but he doesn't have a lot to back up those claims. He just kind of says it. I will say, however, he does almost all the actual evidence he cites is in his section talking about mind control and microwave technology and like directed energy weapons. And he has a lot of sources. And at first I was like, he's making this stuff up. And then I started looking up his sources and realized that he wasn't actually making this stuff up. And he has
that's legit. Our government has been pretty clear about that, actually, like clear in the way that a government is clear. Like, they're actually not hiding that one a whole lot, especially like the MK Ultra stuff. They're like, yeah, we did that. Yes. What are you going to do about it?
Absolutely. And he references MK Ultra. He references scientists and books and military personnel and experiments. And that is the part that we're not going to talk about too much today, but that was my biggest takeaway from his whole thing was like, oh, this is going on more. And I tried to look into it a little bit and I was like, this is going on a lot more than I realized. I think there is something to that. I don't know how much is true and where we're at today and how much is currently being used like on citizens, for instance, as he makes claims of. But I think of all the things that he talks about, that one to me was the most convincing of like, oh, okay, yeah, there's something here. He's hitting on something here. He has real sources here. But that's not most of his stuff. Most of his stuff is we'll get into. Right before I get into the first steps, he says there's a precursor to all this before any of this starts. He says at the end, he thinks that we will see a worldwide economic disaster, which will lead to a phasing out of world currencies, which means we'll adopt an in-between currency and then move over to electronic currency. So he does have a full adoption of electronic currency in here as part of the theory, and that will be used to control people. And he did have a timeline prediction. He said that you would see the electronic currency adopted by year 2000. Of course, he passed in 1996, and so his timeline did not come to pass. I did see people that were a fan of his work created a timeline later on, and that their timeline included everything would start by year 2020, and between 2020 and 2025, you would see World War III, a fake alien invasion, a new world order established, and humans genetically altered to submit to that new world order. So that also has not come to pass. That timeline has not come to pass either, but that wasn't in Sergey's original claims.
There are some things about it that kind of have manifested, obviously, like when you say something
big happening in 2020.
What's that?
Something big happening in 2020. When I saw that timeline, I was like, oh, 2020. Yeah.
Well, and then I think some of this where he went wrong perhaps was on trying to give specific timelines and to be really detailed on the exact way he thought they would come down. So like, just for an example, the digital currency thing, Yeah, clearly we have that happening, but
Now we do,
was
yes,
there
sure.
really an interim monetary system? Not really. We kind of just created digital currencies and we're slowly transferring over to them, and it's taking longer than he predicted. So just
Sure.
for
Yeah.
one example of like, I think that maybe it could be a lot of this could be a timeline issue and a detail issue, but he got the general idea of things right. Like World War III, well, we were looking at something that certainly looks like World War III for a minute there. But now it's starting to kind of settle down a little bit. So I
Yeah.
don't know if you could like interpret that the same way.
Yeah.
But I actually do think there's this other theory that I think is a really interesting one. And it is that there was a timeline set in place by the people who were in control of things in his era.
Mhm.
And that was like the dark hat people, right? Or the black hat people, I mean. And they had everything projected out in a certain way that they wanted it to go down. And he might have been working off of that information, which if you go with the Q stuff and all of that, like anonymous theory, the black hat versus white hat stuff, then you would respond to that with, well, but then the white hats took over and changed the whole thing. So he might actually have been trying to predict a timeline that was inevitably going to change, and he just didn't know it because it got switched over. And we're on a different timeline, which if you look at some of these important years, why was the year 2000 such an important one? Well, we also had Y2K. Was that a timeline shift? And I don't mean timeline like as in some weird like MCU thing. I'm not trying to
No,
get
I know what you mean.
fantastical about it, but
You're like there's a plan in place and the plan
yeah.
got disrupted and now it's either it's not in place anymore or it's pushed down the road, that kind of idea.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's a good way to put it. So in 2000, we had a bit of that. And then in 2012, when the world was supposed to end, maybe that was another timeline shift. Who knows what exactly happened because it changed, right? And so maybe he was working off of those things, but we still see like the residual manifestations in over the course between now and at the time that he was putting this stuff out there. And I think that that's something that is worth considering, I guess.
Worth considering. Well, y'all think about that as I read through these steps, because there's 4 steps here and he laid it out like in order. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. I'm not sure if we've seen any of these steps in order. We maybe seen parts of some of these steps occurring or maybe occurring. And yeah, so it's possible. I will not completely do away with the fact that it is possible he could have just been combining all the conspiracy theories that he was a fan of in the 90s and put them all together into one big sort of like ultra conspiracy theory manifesto, because that is kind of what it reads like to me. And so far it has, unless of course, the plan got disrupted or whatever, we've been, we're 30 years later and we haven't even finished step 1 yet. But I'm going to read through all 4 of these steps. I'm not saying that none of this could possibly be true or the government couldn't do any of these things, but I'm just pointing to this was the original theory. And so here it goes. Step 1, a fake disproving of world religions or reevaluation of all archaeological knowledge. That's the first thing that's going to happen. And I'm just going to blitzkrieg through this. So he said this is going to occur by the government creating artificial earthquakes. He didn't say how they would, but artificial earthquakes would be created at precise locations around the planet, which would uncover via the earthquakes new archaeological discoveries. These archaeological discoveries would be planted there that actually be fakes, and these fake discoveries would disprove Christianity, disprove pretty much all religions, but he specifically quotes Christianity and Islam as the big ones that it would disprove. New evidence showing that these religions are just misinterpreted or misunderstood. And this was part of establishing a coming new age, one world religion. And that's, of course, his base. That's what he claims is the basis for the new world government. But the new age religion, the new one world religion has to come before the new world government. And that's because that's where the government's going to derive its legitimacy from. And so that's the first step, is to these fake archaeological discoveries to undermine Christianity and Islam. He also threw out there that movies and TV are priming us psychologically, both for this, but also for a fake coming alien invasion, which I'll get into a second. He threw out there like Space Odyssey, Star Trek, and especially Independence Day. And he said as like Independence Day is like nations coming together to repel invaders. He's like, this is being put into our psyche so that people are prepared for when we see what's about to happen. Then they're like, okay, let's all unify around this common threat.
Conditioning us.
Conditioning, right? So we talked about conditioning there. That was step number 1. So I don't think that's happened. Not
I
that
think
I
that
haven't.
there's an element of truth to it, but he's so prescriptive on it that it's like, man, not every single one of those details has come up. But I will say that here's one really interesting thing that I have seen coming around, and it's not quite as sensational or dramatic as an earthquake erupted like something, and we have an exposure of all these things that we now can prove or disprove religions.
Right.
But there are constantly evolving what's the word I'm looking for? Like new findings of additional manuscripts or additional things to some of the existing religions. Number one being Christianity. And what I foresee coming down the pipeline with that is actually things being added to the Christian religion, quote unquote, specifically that undermine the deity of Jesus. And that are being slowly more and more accepted. And once again, it always comes back to the whole deism thing that I always talk about.
For sure. I'm gonna do away with the NASA's Project Bluebeam up there, but people can find that on that site for themselves. Because I'm not reading off of it, I'm reading off my notes. Okay, so possible undermining of religions occurring. Step 2 is a gigantic holographic space show. This is where I think all what people are referencing anytime they talk about Project Bluebeam. So he says there will be a 3D holographic laser show projected into the atmosphere. This will happen across the entire planet, globally. It will be. This one is not the alien invasion. That happens next. This one is actually all deities, all gods and deities will be shown in the sky, and they'll be speaking in people's language, different languages, and it will be the fulfillment of prophecies of multiple religions. For Christianity, it will be Jesus returning in the sky, and all these gods and messiahs will speak to all of the people and explain to them that their religion is actually a little bit wrong, a little bit of a misinterpretation. The documents got corrupted or whatever it is, and basically they're going to convince them that all religions are kind of the same, and then that deity is then going to morph into, all the gods are going to combine and morph into one new Messiah or Antichrist, and that Antichrist's new Messiah in the sky will then convince the whole world that all their religions have been combined now. And so that's like a one-shot thing that's going to occur that's going to make all people be like, oh, wow, all religions are actually the same, and make us all want to follow this new Messiah Antichrist guy. The idea is this would be projected by laser generating satellites into the sodium layer of the atmosphere, which he says is about 60 miles above the Earth. And then, it's going to show fulfillments of prophecies from multiple religions, all combined into to move over to the new religion. I already said that. And this is where he makes the claim that UFOs and flying saucers are simply tests. They're developing their holographic show. They're testing it out before they get going, and that's what people are seeing. It's a very small claim he makes. It's like a sentence, and so I did think that was interesting. There's not really much there about the UFO specifically. He just says UFOs are a sign that this is coming, that those are just holograms, and they're building up to this big thing they're going to do.
That one I think is interesting. I'm sorry. Do you want to
hop in?
Okay. So number one, I do think that a lot of the UFO sightings, especially the ones where you see like at night and it's like lights in the skies, those actually could be more of this hologram testing thing that he's talking about. That's very possible, especially the older ones like that you see from the 90s and stuff like that, because there are some old videos of people seeing lights in the sky basically. So that'd be conceptually a pretty easy one to pull off with holograms, right? But also I think that this one in particular is the thing that is, this was the plan from some of the more malevolent actors in this whole stage back before things did get switched over. This was what they were going to do. And so he was onto something with what they wanted to have happen, but it appears as though it has pivoted and it's taking a different direction now. Maybe a same level of deception, but a different way to do it in general. That's how I look at it anyway.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Continuing step 2, he said this is going to kick off. I thought this was kind of interesting. I figured that he would say that it would make people be like peacefully joined together into one religion. But at first he says no. He says that it actually will kick off basically a mass religious hysteria where he predicts that nations and religions will blame each other for being deceived. Like they'll believe the Messiah and then they're going to be angry at other religions and other nations of like, no, the only reason I believed what I believed was because you guys deceived me somehow. And so then you're going to have religious fanatics attacking each other. And then he also threw in there that there would be demonic possession at a scale never witnessed. There's 2 different times where he throws in the spiritual, which is only twice in the whole document. Most of the time it's all fake. But here in one other instance, he actually just straight up says demonic possession. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So a little bit of spiritual worldview thrown in there. And then this would just cause a general worldwide anarchy and societal collapse. So that will come right after the seeing the Messiah in the sky thing. So that's the end of step 2. Moving on to step 3, interrupt at any point. But step 3 is when he gets into mind control and electromagnetic wavelength devices. I thought this was kind of interesting. This was one of the things I thought it was interesting. He had so much. There's so much here. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like you could have done with just any of them. Like you could make the world go crazy if you had realistic projections that convinced all religious people that their Messiah just came back and then morphed into like one new God that wants you to follow them. Or if there was just mind control, if you had devices where you can just literally just control people's minds, you could just do that. Like, why do the holograms thing when if you could just control people, make them do whatever you want to do, why do that? So this is one of the things. The whole thing reads to me as a little incoherent. I will say that for myself. But here's the mind control, and he talks really long about this. This is like 9 pages of his 12-page thesis is literally on mind control. Most of the theory is on mind control. He talks at length about this. And basically, he does have a lot of evidence that he brings about microwaves being able to affect the human brain and stuff like that. He mentions a lot of experiments and different things. However, he doesn't point to anything that I know of that exists yet where you can just beam some thoughts into this person's head. And that's what he talks about the most. He says make people think that they're hearing from their own God within themselves. So he will beam like into your brain and make you think you're hearing from your deity or your God, whoever you follow, and then you will do what that deity is telling you to do, but it's actually just thoughts being beamed into your brain via like satellites and stuff. He claims this technology already exists, and he claims it's actively being used right now, or at least in 1994, to influence people or to torture dissenters from afar. He did not like George Bush, and he claimed, not George W. Bush, he claimed that George Bush, the original George Bush, was in on all this stuff, and George Bush even had somebody on behalf of George Bush used this kind of thing to affect George Bush's opponent he was running against, to disrupt him with this kind of mental device that would cause him to be worse at public speaking, and so he would lose the election and George Bush would win. He includes George Bush, the original George Bush, as like in on all this stuff. Anyways, but he does point to some interesting stuff. He points to MK Ultra. He points to a Nobel Peace Prize nominee, Dr. Robert Becker, who did lots of experiments. And this Dr. Becker person seriously warned the public about the potential of developing microwave devices that could drive people crazy or beam messages directly into their brains. He did experiments showing that you can feel microwaves set to certain frequencies hitting your brain. And he was like, this could possibly be like used to communicate or like hurt somebody's head or stuff like that. He quotes some military experiments and things like that. And so this episode is on UFOs, but I thought he just talked so much about this. It was kind of like this. He had more evidence on this kind of thing, I feel like, than anything else. And then I will get into do you have any more thoughts on that before I get into the last step, which is fake supernatural manifestations?
Yeah, I can read this little excerpt for you.
Go for it. From
this document that I have here. I don't want to lose my spot in it. I don't remember what the title is, but I'm not going to move around because I just want to read right here. So
is this the 1970s one?
This is a different one.
Oh, a different one. Okay.
A different one. Yeah. So, but it's on the electromagnetic field stuff. So the potential applications of artificial electromagnetic fields are wide-ranging and can be used in many military or quasi-military situations. Some of these Potential uses include dealing with terrorist groups, crowd control, controlling breaches of security at military installations, and anti-personnel techniques in tactical warfare. In all of these cases, the EM systems would be used to produce mild to severe physiological disruption or perceptual distortion or disorientation. In addition, the ability of individuals to function could be degraded to such a point that they would be combat ineffective. And then it goes on with more of that kind of rhetoric. So here, let me now scroll back up since I read all that.
Yeah, and he talks about that, and he claims he makes some statements about I mean, like thinking that this has been used on protesters before in the past and stuff like that. Those are different from mind control. But I get what it's getting at, though. He's pushing up like, see, we already know this exists, and so he's getting at saying that like, but there's more. They're developing more that could actually be implanting thoughts into people's minds. He actually makes the claim that the Soviet Union already had developed and was using those kinds of devices, but that they were so good that they could implant the desire or the thought to unalive oneself, and that was actually, and he claims that was already being used against people who were dissenting this coming new world order. So that was one of the, I feel like one of the sensational claims that he made. But
yeah, it is sensational, but it is a very complex science because every human body is different. So what you then have to do is some sort of mass poisoning. So you can think of the body like, and this is me speculating, just to be clear.
Yeah, sure.
You can think of the body as like a walking potential antenna. The more poisons and heavy metals you put in your system, the more susceptible you are to vibrations in the energy field around you, right? And it all depends on what level your body is now vibrating at, quote unquote. And as we know, you can connect vibrational frequencies together when you get them on the same field, right? So if you can get a mass population kind of in the same general frequency level based on how you poison them, then you could probably have more success with subtly suggesting certain thoughts, or maybe not. Like, I think that to say that specific words are planted in somebody's head is taking it a little far, but you can actually put people into certain vibrational fields. And that was the whole 5G debacle that happened. A lot of people were upset about that because the 5G field did something to our bodies, and the more poison you have in your system, the more susceptible you are to what it's doing. So, but I'm still on the fence about like whether or not you can actually specifically target an individual and drop an exact particular thought in their head. You know, that's a little bit much, but I do think you can control the masses with very nefarious tools like that.
Yeah.
And this is just one of those proofs that, like, not only can we actually do these kinds of things, but the government is actively pursuing it. And this was written in 1986, this one that I read. So
1986. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I definitely
if they
know.
were doing that in 86. Imagine what they were doing in 2020. You know what I mean?
Sure. Oh goodness, yeah. The frequency stuff, good and bad, is one of the most fascinating things out there. It's always, when you first look into it, it always seems so, like, to me as well, it seems like this is pseudoscience, this is crazy. But at this point, like, I'm not gonna get into this in detail, but like, I've gone to, more naturopath doctors and stuff that use some kind of frequency medicine. And that's just based off just technology. It's like sending certain kinds of frequencies into your body. And there's frequencies that are healthy for your body, and there's frequencies that are hurtful for your body. And that once you realize that exists, that is possible, then it kind of opens up this whole world of that question of like, well, what else is possible? Like, how, at what extent is this, like you said, it's just like, can we do some things that are, kind of change the electromagnetic field and affect people's mood a little bit, like make people more depressed? Or does it go as far as to like, well, now it's going to get into the mind control? That's quite the step. Obviously, that would be a huge step there. But yeah, I think only more and more and more people are going to realize how important frequencies are and frequency technology is and what it can do. I don't know. I think there is a lot of evidence that some of that stuff exists, and some of it that's tried to be used for good has even been kind of like covered up by the government or by different people that don't want it out there. So a lot of weird stuff People can go. That's a deep dive. People can go jump into if they want
Yeah.
to. That is, I'm not going to cover any more of that for now. But let me get
It's
into
funny
this.
because in this paper alone, it starts out with, "Hey, we discovered this technology that could like heal bones and do
Yeah.
all this crazy stuff." But also, it's got this military application where you
Mhm.
can do crowd control. Like what? Okay.
I forgot. Sergey also makes that claim. He makes the claim that the technology exists via frequency wave technology, essentially, for healing people. And he
Yeah.
makes the claim. He's like, this exists now. The government can do this. And then he's like, but they're not going to. You're not going to see this. You're not going to see people them using this to actually make people's lives better. You're only going to see it to make people's lives worse. That's his claim, right?
Right.
But it is interesting. It made me think about the. Well, he doesn't get into that. I thought maybe he was going to be like, they're going to use it for religious purposes. They're going to be like, look, we can do signs and miracles, and it's actually just going to
Right.
be frequency
You would
stuff.
think.
But he doesn't make that claim. But it piqued my interest, where I was like, huh, interesting. I wonder if that's a
I
possible.
personally think that is what it's going to be used for at some point.
I wouldn't be too surprised that being a
Yeah.
possibility if it was
Connect
really
that
that
to
good.
like nanotechnologies and Neuralink and stuff like that. Like, yeah, you've got a perfect dystopian future right there, or utopian, whatever.
All right. We're getting close to the hour mark. So let me finish this one off here. This is step 4. This is the final step. And this is a lot to this one. So hold on to your hat. Hold on to your tinfoil hat. And I also made the connection why people wear tinfoil hats. I didn't know why people wore tinfoil hats until I read this stuff about the mind control. And then I was like,
Can't let you be reading my mind, man.
this is why people wear tinfoil hats. So you can't beam thoughts into their brains. So I should have been wearing my tinfoil hat today. All right. Step 4. This is the final step of his of Sergey's theory here. It is more fake supernatural manifestations, and of course, the actual global takeover occurs in this final step. So he claims that this is going to happen within hours of the Sky Show event. Like that would be I mean, it didn't happen in the timeline he thought it would be, but it would have been a crazy day if it had, because you had the religious thing happen, and then you had all the people freaking out and stuff. And now you have, within hours, within the same day, apparently, he thinks there would be a fake alien invasion at every major city. And again, this is part of where it's like, why do you have to have both? Wouldn't one be enough? But whatever. Fake alien invasion at every major city in the world. And then he makes this claim, which I think is an incoherent claim, which is that then the nations will try to nuke the aliens. But then the United Nations is going to use that as a rationale for taking nukes away from all the nations. And they're going to say, you tried to nuke the aliens, but it was a fake invasion. So you don't get to have nukes anymore. And I don't know if it was a translation error or if he really is just making a very incoherent claim, because I was like, this doesn't make any sense, because if the UN admits that the alien invasion was fake and uses that as a rationale for taking away the nukes, you just admitted your trump card. You just admitted that who faked the invasion then? Of course, they faked the invasion, which if you admit that to the nations, all of a sudden the nations would be like, wait a second, this is fake? No, we're not giving you our nukes. Somebody's trying to manipulate us. Anyways, I thought that was an incoherent claim. I read it like 4 or 5 times. It's only in 2 sentences, and it didn't make much sense to me. But that was, from what I read in my English translation, that was what he claimed. The United Nations would use it as rationale for taking away nukes, this fake invasion. Whether the nations know it's fake or not, I don't know. But they also included a fake rapture would occur as well. And this was going to be, I'm not very clear. He wasn't very clear about this, but he said something about this disposing of any significant opposition to the New World Order. That made me think of like the people that would be raptured would be people that the New World Order doesn't want around. And so they would pick them up and kill them, or pick them up and put them somewhere else. He wasn't very clear on that. But he did claim that tractor beams exist that can lift people up and put them somewhere else. And so they could fake this rapture by using tractor beams to like lift up people and stick them somewhere. I don't know where they would stick them, but he doesn't get very detailed on that claim. But he does claim that this technology already exists, and he points to people experiencing alien abductions as proof. So anybody who has claimed that they were abducted by aliens and claims that a light shone on them and they were frozen in place and then they got lifted up into the UFO or whatever their claim is, he points to that and says, that is the technology that they're going to use to like lift people up for a fake rapture. Doesn't get too detailed on what that fake rapture is going to look like. It's just going to be, people are going to be transported somehow. And then the third and final piece of this final step here is they're going to use all existing TV and communication lines. So any technological lines that existed at that point, communication lines. This again, This one was weird to me. To blast people with demonic activity. And
Mm.
he, quote, mixture of electronic and supernatural forces. So this is where it was weird because it sounds like he's talking about tech being used to transfer demons into people. And I don't know if that, again, I'm like, is this a translation error? He did talk about demonic possession earlier, so maybe he does have a supernatural idea that somehow the demonic is going to be involved in this. I myself do not understand. Like, to me, I'm like, wouldn't they just be transporting more like fake stuff? But it sounded like to me like he was saying they're actually transporting real demons through technological lines, which I think sounds ridiculous. But that was what he said. I don't know if he actually meant that the demons are real or if they're fake. I couldn't tell. But he did say, maybe I was just reading it wrong. He thinks the demons are going to be fake. But to me, his language sounded like he thought they were going to be real. But he did claim that this would cause mass psychological damage. And then that would basically be the end. People would give up all freedoms for the sake of peace and allow total takeover to happen because they would just be at the end of their rope from all the crazy stuff that's happening and the psychological damage that would occur through this final weird kind of demonic thing. And then that would be it. And then the whole world would be enslaved, and everybody would be forcefully working or in a concentration camp or just enslaved in their home or be executed. There'd be mass execution camps. He paints this really dark, bleak picture there at the end about how awful it's going to be. And that is it. He does make a few more extraordinary claims kind of throughout this whole thing. I already talked about the mine beam sabotaging George Bush's opposition. This one I thought was weird. He said that when the space show takes place for the New World Religion, the UN would herald in the New World Religion with an anthem, and it would be Beethoven's Ode to Joy would be playing like globally.
It's like Ode to Joy is like 666 or something like that. I don't know, like there's some sort of numerical frequency that happens. Something like that. I don't remember exactly what.
This seems like he's getting this from something I don't know about that song.
Yeah,
like
I can't remember.
It has some weird demonic nature to it or something.
That actually only popped up in my head as you were saying it. I wish I had thought of it earlier and I would have looked it up. But yeah,
but I mean, I thought that one stuck out to me because I was like, why Ode to Joy? But I didn't have time to look into it. So I was just throwing that out there. So there's other claims that he made, but we're at the hour mark, so I won't get into the rest of them. But that's enough. That's most of what he claimed and talked about. So my question to you, Doug, to finish this up here, any thoughts you have about this? What do you think about was Sergei's Project Bluebeam, again, written in 1994? Do you think that this has evolved or taken on its own life since then after its death? And if so, how? Do you think it's changed at all? Like when people talk about it now, is it different than what he envisioned, what I just read, those 4 steps I envisioned for 1994? Do you have any thoughts about that?
I think that it's a lot of it is taking place, but it's just not so literal and direct as he was suggesting. And I think let's talk about the demon thing, for example. The whole demons coming through TVs. Well, we do have that happening. The device that's in your pocket does that. You can invite the demonic into your home via that device. But so it's not so direct as like the TV is going to turn on in the middle of the night and a demon's going to crawl through it and sit on your bed until you wake up and like then possess you or something. Like that's getting a little crazy. Like, and that's a weird way to put it. But the reality is, depending on what you expose yourself to with the technology that you have, I literally have like 4 screens sitting in front of me right here that like I just have as part of my life, and depending on what I do with them, I could get into trouble with that, right?
Sure,
I could invite the demonic in, and I'm actually very particular. This is coming from somebody who I always say, because it's funny, raised on horror movies. I used to watch them a lot when I was little. And there is a demonic presence with the media that we consume. And I think maybe what he was getting at was, and didn't know what that he was getting at, was that this would just be more commonly available. We have little kids running around with these devices in their hands who don't know what they're doing with them, who might be getting exposed to this garbage, So it's like, that's a really good example of how the esoteric can be misunderstood and then put a little bit too literally, right? So that's not very literal. That is very speculative.
For sure.
That's out there thinking, but I believe that is a thing, but it just isn't as literal as he said it. So that's just one example. And we could take that concept and apply it to everything he said, basically, except for maybe a handful of things. So, but he's on the right track. So it has evolved into something different. And then the other example that I'll give, and we'll be done with it, is the idea that like the entire thing would be broadcast in the skies, right? Well, we don't need that right now, because what we're ending up with having is we're moving to a digital world where people are more and more online. And actually, the movie Ready Player One is the most weirdly metaphorical thing for what I think is going to end up happening, where people are just so connected and so in the digital world. Well, we're not going to need the use of holograms, because the one world religion might come through the screen that your brain is now connected to 24/7 that you can't get out of. Like that maybe is the new Babylon. So things like that, like I think the concepts behind what he's saying are accurate. It's just how exactly they manifest is kind of up for debate now. But at one point or another, the devil is pushing us to that end, and that's what he picked up on. This is what the devil wants for us, and he'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. And if one thing fails, he'll just conjure up another thing in its place. It's like he's the ultimate Hydra, right? So
right, like if you stop one of these specific instances with a, you know, kind of like the whack-a-mole, like if you hit one of the moles, then it's just going to pop up in a different spot. You know, it's like same kind of pattern, same kind of you know, ploy for control and malign and manipulation, but just happening in a different way. I really liked how you described, like, we don't need the atmospheric global projections anymore to, you know, convince people of things, because you can manipulate people in other ways. And now we have the technology with AI, which I have seen some AI videos recently that really concern me, because I'm starting to not be able to tell between reality. Like, you know, this is footage of somebody doing something, and I'm staring at this and I'm like, is this actual footage or is this AI footage? And I'm starting to not be able to tell the difference anymore. And that's concerning, because it's like, that's a hologram now. People watching it on their phones or on TV, but we could have a literal, like, this event is occurring and a mass deception, and the event didn't even occur because it was just completely AI generated. I like your general thoughts on this. I like the idea. I think that's why. I think this is my final closing thoughts on this. I do not believe in the specifics of this theory. I think he got the timeline wrong, but it's not really about the timeline. I think the theory, the reason it stuck around and the reason why people still quote it all the time, for as I can tell, is because it's general enough. It really, it basically weaves in a bunch of conspiracy theories and general paranoia. And I'm not saying like, you know,
you're not saying it in a negative way necessarily.
I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm saying like actual real reasons why people have concerns and a general paranoia of secret groups and government doing secret things. Some of them that's been declassified, other things that people will just hint at or are guessing at. But it's a general sense of that kind of paranoia. It weaves all of them together into like a master narrative of how this is going to play out and what's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen this way. I really don't. I don't think there's going to be holographic projections of Jesus's return. All of this seems very far-fetched for me. I don't think it explains the UFOs that we're seeing today. Some of the UFOs could be potentially that laser pointer thing that we talked about before, but there's too many UFOs that are just seeing something else more physical. It doesn't explain away all of the numerous instances of the UFOs, but I do think it does make a nice, easily understood narrative of like lots of conspiracy theories together, general paranoia together, that I think has become kind of like a name for people to just kind of throw out there of like, yeah, this general deception is happening. I'm glad that I looked into it. I'm glad I understand it more. I'm not trying to dunk on anybody that firmly believes in it. But after my research and looking into it, I definitely do not believe in the general claims that he's making. But he does claim so much, and he digs into so many of those concepts, like you talked about, that you can kind of make the metaphorical jump from like, well, this kind of thing is sort of happening, and that kind of thing is sort of happening. And I think that's probably why it's going to stick around and used as kind of like a storytelling device for like the weird stuff that we have happening today. So I don't know. Maybe that's. You have any other final thoughts on that? But I think that's my closing thoughts on this.
No, that's a pretty good ending there, I think.
Okay, well, let us know what you guys think about Project Bluebeam in the comments below. If you disagree with my take or Doug's take, or you agree, let us know and let us know why. Love to have that conversation with you all in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all to our live stream viewers that are having a conversation while this is going on. And yeah, we look forward to seeing y'all next week. I'll be doing my final Monday alien deep dive, where I will be talking all things religious and spiritual related to this. And I think that will finish up asking those final questions I was trying to get into, which is it possible these are biological aliens, or is it possible that these are actually, in fact, spiritual beings? And what do we do about that? Until next time, God bless.
Gold is not just a backup plan if the world falls apart. It's an investment opportunity that could set you up for generations. There's never really a bad time to invest in gold, but you want to make sure you have the right guide. And that is where Genesis Gold Group shines. Whether you are a first-time buyer or a seasoned investor, their trusted expertise and competitive pricing makes them an easy choice. They offer tangible assets in case of emergencies, but they can also design the perfect IRA just for you. And they'll even cut through all that confusing red tape from the IRS. We at Filibusted love the genius design of the Prepper Bar, which breaks up into sections like a chocolate bar. But if you prefer a more high-security insured gold storage, they have that too. And unlike Fort Knox, the gold is actually there and 100% owned by you. Genesis Gold Group is a safe, simple, and convenient way to invest. Visit filibustedgold.com today for your free investment guide from Genesis Gold Group.